Welcome to episode 2 of season 2 of Brain Health Matters, a podcast dedicated to helping you connect with the people and resources that will help you improve your memory, boost your brain, and reduce the risk of developing dementia. In season 1, we had a new episode every week, but for season 2, at least for the first few months, we're only going to be releasing a new episode every 2 weeks so that I can focus on treating the many clients who are seeking help for a better brain, and so that I can focus on writing my newest book, The Mindful Brain. So be sure to subscribe to Brain Health Matters on YouTube or your favorite podcast service so you'll get notifications when each episode is released. Because every time we share important information that could change your life or the life of a loved one. And this week, can a simple game of catch help us to improve our brain function? You'll find out in just a moment.
Brain Health Matters is brought to you by Don't Let the Memories Fade. Learn many enjoyable ways to enhance body, mind, and spirit with simple lifestyle changes that will help you improve your memory and your mind. You can create a healthier, more vibrant future with Don't Let the Memories Fade. Available in ebook and paperback on Amazon everywhere.
Hello there, and welcome to Brain Health Matters. I'm your host, Kate Kunkel, and this week I'm joined by Trent McEntire. For more than 2 decades, Trent has been helping people gain their mobility and quality of life, a story he can very well relate to. Born with a mild form of cerebral palsy, Trent experienced pain and stiffness every day from the time he was a child. The methods he discovered to repair his own body also became the foundation for what has become his life's work. Today, Trent joins us to share the connections between our brains and what and how we see. Welcome, Trent.
Hi, thank you so much, Kate.
I'm so excited to have you here. You have got quite a story, and I'd like to start with that. How on earth did you get involved in all of this?
Right, it is quite a story. Like you said, I was born with a mild form of cerebral palsy, and that's something that I didn't know growing up. I just thought the way I felt was normal, and everybody felt this way, and it wasn't anything to be sort of like alarmed about, but it didn't feel good. I just didn't know that there was anything that was causing my sensations and feelings and what's going on. And I was always athletic as a kid. I played basketball, and even as I got older, and as it would turn out, I got into taking a dance class. And taking dance classes made me feel so much better because there's so much stretching and strengthening involved that all of the limitations and tightness from being born with a head injury, being born with cerebral palsy, it was like an antidote for that. It helped me so much. And I was athletic, and so I kind of excelled at being able to dance. And I went to college and I had a scholarship to go to a dance program, and it was awesome. And it was like my way out of my small town. It was like I can go do something with my life. And unusual to come from a dairy farm and then go on to college to become a professional dancer. But that was my path, and I pursued it. And it wasn't too long into being in the program that I woke up and I could barely walk in the morning. I had just so much pain and inflammation from the knees down that I just was like, this could be like ending. I don't even know that this is something that I can get over. It was pretty huge. And that really was the very start of developing what has now been 25 years of helping people overcome their own limitations. Because I went home and I was like, complaining to my mom over Christmas break that I don't know what's going on. Like, it hurts so much from the knees down. I can barely walk. And why there? And I don't get the tightness and the pain. And she's like, well, Trent, that's because you were born with cerebral palsy. And so at 19 was the first time that I had been given any reason as to why I felt the way I did. But also, she started to kind of unpack why it would be from the knees down. She's like, well, when you were 3, the doctors put casts on your legs to force your heels to the ground because your Achilles tendon was so short that you couldn't walk with your heels on the ground. You had no range of motion in your ankles.
So you had no memory of that?
No memory until she said, do you remember when they cast your legs? And I was like, oh, I had this flash memory of being little, having casts on my legs, and my brother putting garbage bags on them and throwing me in a snowbank, because that would be the funny thing for an older brother to do.
Yay, older brothers, huh?
Yeah, right. But that was my only memory of that. And there was no surgery, there was no other invasive procedure, there's no physical therapy. It was just cast on, then they were off and on with my life. And for the most part, it was fine until I really challenged myself athletically to really push to discover I really had a lot of limitations. And so being a college student and being on scholarship and paying for my own college on top of that, I didn't have the resources to hire professionals to take a look at what's going on and try to help me. So I relied on the dance program and the kinesiology and the anatomy and the movement therapies and all the stuff that I was learning in the program to rehab my own injury. So I was my first client. I rehabbed my injury successfully, went on to dance professionally, and started to use it with other people. That was the launch pad of everything.
So this realization that you had these limitations that weren't really limiting you except at the end there, because you
Right.
overcame them all in a very dramatic way, it seems, with
Yeah.
dance. Um, when you say helping other people, was that other people who were in your dance program, or how did you start working with people?
Yeah, it did start in the dance program because I was when I was a little bit older in the program, the kinesiology professor and the dance conditioning professor had me assisting her courses. And so part of being a TA for the class was taking on half of the students as my clients and working with them. And so it was great practice. But still at that point, I was just I didn't know what I knew. I didn't know what I had discovered. I just fixed my body and was on my way and, kind of applying everything I'd learned, but I didn't have any intention of building a program or having a certification or, you know, anything that somebody else might use. I was just kind of naturally using what I'd used on myself.
Sure. So now there came a point when you did realize that there was something more, and it had something to do with a trade show or something where you were seeing something
Yeah.
differently?
Yeah. Well, I failed the first grade, and that was something that I wouldn't share until I was in my 40s because it was embarrassing to think of like you failed the first grade. Who fails first grade? Well, I moved schools and my reading was behind. And so that was um, the first time there was any indication that reading was a problem for me. And by the time I was in third grade, the solution for reading problems was to give you more reading. So that's what my teacher did. Oh, you have a hard time with reading? Here's more reading to do. But it wasn't actually like comprehending the words or identifying letters or putting things together. It was that literally I discovered at this trade show that I'll tell you about that my eyes didn't work together. They were weak and they weren't coordinated and they didn't function well together. So when I was reading, it would create strain and problems because both eyes weren't looking at the same thing at the same time. And so it would essentially put me to sleep, like two sentences in to a book, and I would just fall asleep because it was too much for my brain to process both images
Trent, I've
coming my
heard
eyes.
that from people now a few times that they try to read and they go to sleep. Maybe that's why I need to have them touch base with you.
Yeah, yeah. So I there's lots of wonderful vision therapists that do great work. And I happened to meet one at a trade show. But what was funny about it is that um, before going to the trade show, and I was there for other reasons, I was talking to a client and I was talking about a book series that I was reading, and that was really great. And I got to get the next book in this series. But I wasn't reading the series, I was listening to the audiobook because I was too ashamed to say that I wasn't reading the book. I was listening to the book. So she didn't know that I was listening and not reading. And the next time she came in before my trip, she brought me a copy of the next book in the series. And I was like, oh, now I've got to download the audio, listen to it, report back. I felt all this obligation around the whole thing. And the reality was that I took the book. I didn't read it on the way there on the plane. It was a long plane ride, like 3 hours. Um, but while I was at this trade show, I did a couple eye exercises with a vision therapist. And I couldn't believe when I got back to my booth, a friend had stopped by and left a note for me that had missed me. And I read this note and I was like, I've never read that fast in my life. Like that was incredible. And it was easy and I don't hurt, I don't have a headache. And on the plane ride home, I read the entire book that my client had given me. And I got home and I was like to my wife, I'm like, I need to get the rest of this series. And she's like, you mean the audiobook? I'm like, no, the actual physical, tangible book to read. And she's like, who are you? And what have you done with my husband? And so that was really what lit me on fire with how important the eyes are when it comes to quality of life and movement and coordination and flexibility and balance. The eyes are at the heart of it all. And so putting 20 plus years of working with bodies and working with the fact that our brains are plastic and we can learn new patterns, and then getting hit over the head with how powerful the eyes are became just a 1-2 punch for putting it all together.
So all those years then you were working with people to help them become what, dancers or athletes, or just to be more
Oh, I had
coordinated?
clients with osteoporosis, professional athletes, MS, like Parkinson's, you name it. That's
Okay, so
the
you were helping
gamut.
them with movement then.
Yeah,
Ah,
right.
okay. So
Yeah.
now you've come to a place where you are learning the importance of the eyes
Mhm.
with movement then. Well, with actually just reading. So how did you extrapolate then from, wow, I can read better to, wow, eyes can make movement better? How did that
Yeah.
happen?
So a couple things happened. The first was that I was like, these books started coming out about the brain, and I'm like, well, this seems like it'd be good for me to read these books because they're probably related to what I do in some way. And I start reading them, and I'm like, uh, this is what I do. Like, yeah, the brain's plastic, and I don't have the language around it. I don't have the vocabulary, but this is exactly what I'm doing with people. And all kinds of stuff. It was just like, okay, now I have a language. Now I have literature to point to, and I have a little bit clearer sense of what I'm really doing, because it was just my instinct. It was just what had worked for me is working for other people. But then when I learned that the brains are plastic and they can change, and I can actually build patterns a certain way, and there's a science behind it and the vocabulary behind it, it helps support it. Well, along with that literature comes out that how the research shows how important the eyes are in relationship to movement. That the stronger, the more flexible, the better coordinated your eyes are, not just acuity, not well how crisp you see, but the actual movement of your eyes is directly correlated to how you move your body and how your body is coordinated and has focus and regulation. And so that became basically my curiosity on doing before and after testing, which is one of my favorite things to do. It's like you take anybody in a situation, whether you're focusing on balance, for example, and have you do a simple movement that would maybe challenge your balance, and then do sensory training with your eyes, and then do an after test, and then see what you could make improve. And it was through doing thousands of those with many people that I could make a direct correlation and find a really easy, fast way into improving someone's quality of movement because it's through their eyes. And so often we think of movement as like you've got to go exercise, and it's awesome. I'm athletic. I coach volleyball. I'm a mountain biker, but I have to use my eyes to improve all of those activities. And in fact, I just ran a before and after test on myself because I do mountain bike 2 to 3 times a week. And this week we did 2 rides. I did a 14-mile ride and I did a 6-mile ride. The 14-mile ride was really for the endurance of the 14 miles. And I really focused on my joint mobility and muscle warmth and mechanics in my body before I rode. And it was a fine ride. The second ride I focused on just sensory training, just eyes, just getting a range of motion, strength, pattern in my eyes. And we did a lot of jumps that day. And I felt much better by incorporating the eye stuff than the hour of joint and muscle preparation I did for the first ride. So I'm always testing before and after to prove the concept to myself and to find new ways in to help other people.
That is so fascinating because we always think, I used to work with a lot of Parkinson's clients, and it is such a challenge to get them, to move comfortably, to have a decent gait.
Yeah.
So I never in a million years would have thought of the eye training as something that could help.
Yeah. And the people that I've had the the amazing experience of working with that have Parkinson's, what one of the best responses is the joy and the fun that they have, because there's so much about their disease. It's a movement disease, and so they're losing movement of everything over time. And so when you can give them something that's as simple as playing a game of catch with the brain speed ball, which is what I use, um, it, they become happy and they look forward to doing something. Whereas as they sit there and just watch their abilities dwindle, that's a hard space to be in. So to be able to intersect that with, and there's a really simple, fun game we can play to offer them a little bit of joy and something that they can do with their spouse or their caretaker,
And
it's
to
just
improve
awesome.
their movement. Oh my gosh, it's
Yes,
like the whole package. So tell me
exactly.
about this speedball. I'm going to order one for my dad and I'm really excited about this, but tell us how this thing works.
Yeah. So it's a small bright orange ball that has A through Z and 1 through 12 printed on it. And so we would just play a game of catch, Kate, just back and forth. And what I want to do is make sure that I'm using my eyes and you're using your eyes to track the ball as it goes through space. So right away, we're using our eyes in different directions as the ball is flying to track it. So it's a built-in eye exercise. So you don't have to think about I'm exercising my eyes. It's built in because you're just tracking the ball through space and you're watching it come into your hands. And how we really tap into how your brain processes is that, our brain already goes through this cycle of sensing what's going on, deciding what to do about it, and then acting on it, that sense, decide, act cycle. And since your eyes are like the number one sense, 80% of the information that comes to your brain comes from your eyes. And we're doing eye exercises. So we're tapping into that sense part of it in such a profound way. And then we're saying, when you catch the ball, Kate, I'm going to have you tell me out loud what you see on the ball. So you're tracking it through the air, you catch it, you see the letter P, and then you say P out loud. So you do the tracking, and then you have the sense, decide, act cycle happening over and over and over again.
Right? Because you've got another sense that you're speaking then too.
Yes, yes, yes. So you're bringing those senses and you're moving your body, you're turning your head, your inner ear, your balance, your visual system, it's all combined. But because it's a fun game, you don't really have to know anything about the brain for it to work. You don't have to understand that the brain is plastic. What does that even mean for some people? It's like, what? You know, you don't have to know sense, decide, act, but that's what's happening. That's how our brains are already wired. So it just taps into it. And it does it in a fun way because the fun part of it is essential. There's lots of great eye exercises that exist that are not fun. And when they're not fun, we don't want to do them.
Exactly. That's it. That's a whole problem with so many things that are good for us. If it's not fun, so many people just leave it go by the wayside.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really the mindset that I encourage for people. It's fun is really essential to it. So if you have the mindset that this is supposed to be fun at the forefront, then that sets the stage for your success. And then we're looking at really finding a level that's challenging for you. And that means we have to let go of the idea of being perfect. We have to let go of the idea of never dropping the ball. So actually, a really healthy game of brain speed ball is that you and I are both dropping the ball once in a while. Then we're being challenged and we have to really go for the ball and we have to find a way to track it and get to it and make our whole body coordinate to receive that ball. But if you're always dropping it, it's too hard. If you're
Right.
always catching it, it's too easy. So in the middle where you're dropping it once in a while is where you want to be. It does require letting go of like being perfect. And it's a good exercise among just by itself, right? Um, but then also we want to we want to encourage creativity. We want to make sure that you're playing new and creative games that you come up with on your own. Because ultimately, the game works because you're tracking and you're going through the brain cycle. So you can come up with any game you want against the wall on one foot with a partner, with your grandkids in a group, preschool group, senior living home. You can get really creative as long as you're tapping into those senses, it works.
So, because my focus of interest is people with dementia.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to imagine how we could help people with dementia or even early cognitive decline. What could we do with this ball to help, or what would about this ball help with that?
Yeah, I'll tell a story. It's a more extreme example because there's all stages of dementia, of course. So this is a client that I had for about 15 years. So I knew him when there was no dementia. And then I was with him at the end of life care when he's in hospice. And he played brain speed ball right up till the final days of his passing. And it's such an honor to have been with him and still to be able to drop the ball, kind of drop it in his lap, have him kind of grab it with one arm and try to get it back to me. For him, it was like mood regulation. It would calm him down. He would be easier to work with for the caretakers around him and more compliant with changing sheets and clothes and whatever food situation that was going on. And earlier on, when it wasn't as severe for him, he'd have some crabby days where yelling at me was like at the top of his list, and he would yell things. It's like, doesn't make any sense. It's not really personal, but he's frustrated. And so that's when I pull out the brain speed ball, and within 10 seconds, he's laughing and he's challenging me to try to get me to drop the ball. It just is a total mood shift. So I would say at the essential level, it's helping with quality of life, it's helping with movement, it's helping with regulation and focus. But really, it's like finding the place that it can help the person that you care about with dementia. It might surprise you. I was surprised. I'd never had the opportunity to work with somebody like that at the end of their life. Certainly into their 80s and 90s, but not in the last week of their life. To be there and to be with his wife watching and caretakers watching, to see him engaged and then making it easier for them to work with him afterwards, which is then easier for him
Well,
because he's
of
not as
course.
frustrated. He feels better in his body. So yeah, it's pretty magical to be part of that.
Wow, that's wow.
Yeah,
Quite a
I know.
story.
It's amazing.
So that gives me a lot of hope then, because I work with so many people who come to me a little bit too late for us to do much in the terms of reversal, because dementia can be reversed, but it's a big job and it takes a lot of dedication on the part of the client, who may or may not understand what that means, and also the family. But to at least give them some joy. My mom passed away with dementia, Trent, with dementia, but of cancer. So there was a lot of pain. There was a lot of inability to express even that she was in pain. There was so much going on. I sure wish I would have known about this then, because I can only imagine that she would have had a little bit more joy um,
I would
during that
imagine.
process.
And I'll say, before the side effects become severe, there's some things you can do early on. And so I'll just share with you, like some of my favorite games are word association games. So when you catch the ball, instead of saying the letter, you would name a word that starts with that letter.
Ah,
And so then you could really make it really challenging and say, okay, let's do geography. So when you catch it, that letter has to be the name of a place in the world. Then you really have to like dive in and find an answer. Or a math game where you're just doing simple addition. You catch the one, and then the next one you catch is a seven, but instead of saying seven, you'd say eight because you added them together. And you could add up until you get to 100 and then subtract back to zero. And it's a way to stay engaged and get other parts of the brain and that cognitive piece involved and really powerful, but also simple and fun ways, because it's okay if you make a mistake. You're like, I don't know. What is
yeah.
7 + 9? I haven't done that in a while, and just trying to make that connection makes all those neurons.
Yeah, firing, absolutely. I can imagine this would be awesome for children who might not be so communicative. Maybe children with, like somewhere on the autism spectrum, where they could then it's not a pressure, it's just fun.
Yeah, I've got to tell you a story about a young lady that I worked with. She was 14, and her mom would say that she had Asperger's. That would be her description of her situation. Um, and she's like, "I'd love for you to work with her." And I was at a trade show presenting, and she's like, "Can I bring her by your booth and have you work with her?" I'm like, "Yeah, that'd be so much fun." I said, "But I don't want to make it about like her label or condition. Let's make it about something she loves." She's like, "Well, she loves to dance." I'm like, "Well, happens to be right up my alley, so I think we can do something with that." So she brought her by, and I said, "When you're in dance class, what's something that your ballet teacher is just like always kind of harping on you about?" And she's like, "Oh, my head's always down and my jumps aren't high enough." I'm like, "Okay, so I'm not going to teach you anything about dance. I'm not going to tell you to jump higher or to give you technique, but I want you just to do some ballet jumps across the floor." So I had her in this big ballroom doing leaps across the floor. And I said, "Okay, so that's your before. So you see what it felt like for yourself, and I see what it looks like from my perspective. And I have that professional eye, so I feel like I have something to offer you here." And she's very mature, and she's like, "Okay, I'm on board." So we played about 5 minutes of brain speed ball. I said, "Okay, I just want you to just try the same thing over again." And she jumped across the room higher, her head was up, and she's like, "What'd you do? What just happened?" She's like, "That feels better. Like I noticed that is dramatically better." I'm like, "It's pretty cool, huh?" And she's like, "Yeah, that's really cool." So we just kept playing with some before and afters and making it about activities that she loved versus, oh, you have this problem, you have this label, you're Asperger's, you're autistic, all the stuff that can happen. And so went on with my day. She went on with, hers. And after the conference was over, I got home and I got a message from her mom. And she said, I just want to tell you, because this is what happened. What you don't know is that the day before I brought her to you, we were outside, and this conference happened to be in Las Vegas. So it's overstimulation for the average bear. And if sensory, input is overwhelming for you at all, it's a hard place to be. And she said she wanted to go out in the strip. So we went out, and she was crossing the road and was so overwhelmed. She was kind of like fell to a heap and was done and had to be kind of carried out of the road and carried back home. And she said, but then she worked with you, and later that night, there's a party at this conference, and it's like a 3-hour party, and it's loud and there's lights and all this stuff. And she said she comes every year with me, but usually we last about a half an hour, and then she's got to go back to the room and kind of recover. Normal. That's what they expect. That's what normally happens. And she said, Trent, she stayed the entire party. And when we got home, back to the hotel room, she wasn't overwhelmed. There was no recovery. And so to me, that was the win. It's like it shows up in her life without having to make it about her being wrong or somehow making mistakes or the label that somebody has given her. I happen to have the luxury of not being given the label of having cerebral palsy.
Right.
It's a gift. At first, I didn't think it was a gift. At first, I was mad. But in hindsight, it was a gift. So for this young lady and for anybody that I work with, I really try to respect the fact that, they have goals and aspirations first. And if you can help them with those, it has always touched the hardest thing in their life, the most overwhelming piece, or whatever else is going on in their life. So that was so inspiring for me, because certainly she had great response, but to hear the whole story that I didn't know about was powerful.
I love that. So there are so many things, so many people who could be helped by this very simple, fun thing.
Yeah.
And it's not going to take you a PhD to figure it out.
No, it's 5 minutes a day. It's real simple. Yeah.
That's what I love, because as a coach, I know that a lot of people just give up on so many things because it just becomes too much. Even though I try to break it down into little bite-sized pieces for them, often it can just feel like too much. But something that would be fun would be a lot easier to integrate. I'm so excited to learn this, Trent, and I know that our listeners are going to be very appreciative. How can people get a hold of one of these things?
So I'd invite you to go to fireupyourbrain.com, and you can read all about the program and watch stories and videos of people that have used it, and some stories that I haven't shared. We have some wonderful videos of success stories that people have been generous enough to record and share. So
fireupyourbrain.com. Trent McEntire, thank you so much for sharing your story, your personal story, quite a journey you've had yourself, and that you've used that to help so many. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Kate.
Be sure to subscribe to Brain Health Matters on YouTube or your favorite podcast service to ensure that you get all of the latest episodes as they're released, because every time we share important information that could change your life or the life of a loved one.
Brain Health Matters is brought to you by The Musical Brain, Book 3 in the Healthy Brain series. Enjoy the fun and easy practices in this book to improve your memory, sharpen focus, and master your mind with the healing power of music. Available on Amazon everywhere.